You gotta give me the rankings.
Yes. Okay. So number 1, and this is without apology, and if you don't think so, you're wrong. Andor season 1.
Agreed.
And let me tell you, this show, I mean, I think most people who have watched it get it. That number 1, it's got that, you know, that thing that we say a lot when we talk about Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, where like when you can just sit 2 people in a room and have them say words and have me be like, what the fuck? Like that is some good writing, right?
It's good writing. It's phenomenal acting.
There don't need to be explosions. Like just 2 people in a room talking about something. And if you make that interesting to me, it just blows my fucking mind. And the performances in that show are the best performances I've seen in Star Wars possibly ever, with the exception of like Mark Hamill and Carrie and Harrison Ford, right?
Okay.
So that's number 1. I think number 2 is Mandalorian season 2, and you might be tempted to think that it's just because Luke shows up at the end, and that is part of the reason. But also, like, remember there are other really neat moments in that, like the Ahsoka. That's where we see Ahsoka for the first time in live action. People forget that sometimes because we've had a whole show for her. We saw her first in Mandalorian. The whole episode on Tython with fucking Boba Fett. Boba Fett's in this, by the way. Like, there are so many cool fucking things, and there are some good. Like, I don't think the writing in the show is as good as Andor, and it's got the shorter episodes and everything.
It's not trying to be the same type of show as Andor, which is a very writing and words focused show. Mandalorian is. It's a Western. Yeah. So it's a little bit more
so there's
about
a lot
the
of
action.
There's a lot of shots on people twitching fingers over their gun. Yeah, I totally get it. And that's why I'm like, I don't need it to be some like higher level.
It's not as highbrow.
Right. And that's fine. But that being said, there are still moments where it still kind of sends chills down my spine. And like a really good example of that is before they attempt their rescue of Grogu, Mando calls Moff Gideon up and says to him word for word what Gideon says to him in the previous episode about like this kid's more like means to me more than you could possibly imagine, like all that other shit. And it's like,
damn,
that's a good, bring that shit back. Like that's a good way to write that. Ahsoka would be right after that. Okay. I think and you might be thinking, well, Daniel's probably just because Thrawn's in it, and that is a lot of it.
In part, sure.
Like there is, I think my favorite moment of that show is, first of all, the fact that they had the balls to let Thrawn win.
Yes.
Right? He got away. And like, what the fuck's going to happen next? But this cool delivery from him, knowing that Ahsoka and the good guys are right behind him. Something like in a weaker show, something could go wrong where like maybe Sabine like had an explosive on the ship that she hid and it blew up and the hyperdrive doesn't work now or whatever. Yeah. In a weaker show that would happen. But like Thrawn has calculated all possibilities and he knows he's leaving. That is a fact. And that fucking long live the Empire mic drop and he's just fucking gone. And the good guys are like, did we just lose? Fuck. What just happened? Also, we're stranded in another universe or another galaxy. Like, what the fuck are we going to do?
We are even further away.
Yeah. So, and I mean, don't get me wrong. The Anakin Skywalker shit was like, yes, was it fan service? Absolutely.
Yes, it looks a little bit weird.
And I got over
because,
that.
You know, he's what, 2 decades older?
Right.
Now?
Yeah. And he's still hot, but he's not like it's 20 years ago.
Yeah. He's not teen heartthrob.
Yeah. So was it fan service? Yes. Did I shovel it straight in my fucking face the entire time? I absolutely did. And I'm not ashamed of it.
And it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
Like narratively, it made sense.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, Rosario Dawson's so good at it, like she does, and it's okay. Seeing Ezra Bridger in live action for the first time was really fucking cool. Seeing Sabine Wren in live action for the first time was really fucking cool. The droid.
When they finally find Ezra and they see him fight and he's doing all the, you know, spinning around.
Yeah.
I'm not hitting you. I'm not hitting you.
I'm not touching you. The weird Night Sister bullshit with the stormtroopers and the Dance Macabre knockoff music and shit. Like, it was zany and weird, but I really liked it. Anyway, that's up there.
Good show.
Mando season 1 would be right after that.
Okay.
And it's mostly because, like, first live action Star Wars show ever. And for a first offering in the genre, they knocked it out of the park.
You remember how everyone lost their fucking minds the instant we saw Baby Yoda?
Yes, and it was in the first episode.
Yeah.
And I guess some of those details leaked before the show came out, and I just didn't see it. And I'm really glad, because that, like, they picked a thing that I could not have predicted, where I was like, oh, I had never thought about a Yoda species being babies.
Yeah, where does Yoda come from?
I thought he was just born like 800 years old.
Did he just sprout from the ground, all wrinkled and with
he already had his cane and shit? Yeah. It just, like, that was really cool. And also the procedural nature of it, I enjoyed, which is funny because I generally don't like procedural stuff very much. But his, like, adventure of the week thing, and I think that. What's her name that plays Cara Dune?
Fuck, what is her name?
Why? I was just reading a thing about her lawsuit.
Gina Carano.
Yeah, look, I think Gina Carano's a fucking idiot. I really do. I think she should shut the fuck up. But she did a good job in that show. She played a good character. And I think that having, like, Pedro Pascal as, like, his entry into Star Wars being the main character was really fucking cool. And this tangible, loving relationship he immediately forms with this fucking baby on day one. It's like, that's really compelling shit. I really like that. After that, I would put The Acolyte, which we just talked about all the shit we liked about it. After that would be Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Okay.
And there will be quite a bit of space between the two of them. I wouldn't equate the two of them. I think The Acolyte is significantly better made, and
because it wasn't in the pandemic and it wasn't entirely in the
and that's the thing, is I give Obi-Wan a pretty big pass, because I think it was made about as well as it could have been with what was happening globally, right? We just rewatched this a few weeks ago. My partner John was like, "Oh, I've only seen the show once. I want to watch it again." And there are moments in that show that really work. And if it wasn't Ewan McGregor, it might not work at all. But Ewan McGregor and the little girl that plays Leia, that's good shit.
Yeah.
The thing is, then you have, like, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Which isn't a huge deal, by the way.
Like, they could have cast anyone in that role and it would have been fine.
Right.
But the fucking chase sequence through the woods.
It's like, you can tell literally every scene was filmed on the volume. And so when you can't do an action set piece in a room like that, because it's, like, about the size of this room. So it's like you run 3 feet and you're like, you can't run anymore because there's a fucking wall there.
We need to change angles, move all the computer shit around, and run 3 more steps and cut. Let's do that again.
So, and as a result, they have this janky fucking chase where a tiny little bush will stop someone because they need them to stop. And in a better show, there'd be some kind of big fucking thing, and but they just couldn't do that.
Riva, I forget the actress.
Moses or Ingram.
I think, yeah. Highlight of the show.
Yeah, I liked her. I liked her a lot, actually. Rewatching it, I think I might have killed her if I was Obi-Wan, just to make sure, because he does just let her go. Yeah. And I'd be like, this bitch might come back.
like admittedly, Obi-Wan, you've done this before. It didn't work out so well for you.
I think it was also really funny that, like, Obi-Wan has this whole thing with Vader, and then realizes that someone's after Luke. One of my favorite moments in the show, by the way, is Riva finding the broken hollow thing, learning about Luke, but not knowing the significance of it. Just knowing that there's someone there that he cares about, and she's just like, "I'm gonna go fucking kill him." Yeah. And then the episode ending with with an above shot of the kid that plays Luke just sleeping in his bed, and the music and shit, because they start it with a wide shot of the Lars homestead, which when you see any Star Wars fan that sees that, you're just like, oh my fucking god,
shit.
it's this, and Luke in his bed and shit, and the music, and it like pushes in on him, and you're like, holy fuck. And you realize that Obi-Wan's like, oh no, I had one job and I'm not doing that job. And so he gets back, and thank God that like Owen and Beru are pretty okay with a blaster and shit, because if not, like Luke might have died.
Yeah.
And like everything works out, luckily. And then he goes off to see Leia on Alderaan again. Like, did you not, Luke? Like, you gotta stay there. There's also a really funny cut of that is like if Obi-Wan was made in like the early 2000s and had like a some band that was famous back then. I can't remember. I'll show it to you later. The Book of Boba Fett would be after this for me. There's so much about this show that I just don't understand why decisions were made about it that were made.
It has the worst car chase scene I have ever seen.
Like a lot of it's janky. Like a lot of it looks janky.
Half of it isn't even about Boba Fett. It's Mandalorian season 2.5.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
those episodes are the best in the show.
And it's live action Luke Skywalker. And I'm like, I know what they're trying to do to me. And I wish they had left it out, because I think on its own, the story would have been okay. It would have been a more intimate story on Tatooine with Boba Fett and shit. And it was a little boring, and like it wasn't that exciting, but it would have made sense, like pacing wise, to not spend the middle of the show with Luke and Grogu, because it's like, how does this connect in any way? They needed Mando to show up to save the day, and they couldn't have Mando show up without Grogu. So they're like, oh fuck, how do we tell that? Like, how do we figure that bullshit out?
Fucking R2 flying to Tatooine.
Yeah. So yeah, I like the idea of the Book of Boba Fett, and seeing Tamora Morrison as Boba Fett, I'd take that any fucking day. Just not the strongest one.
My poor Gamorrean boys.
Yeah, those thick fucking thighs.
Moment of silence for the Gamorreans.
I don't even know if Gamorreans have gender like that, but I swear to fucking God, those sexiest thighs I've ever seen. They get their asses pushed right off that cliff, don't they? Last on the list, Mandalorian season 3. Really? Yes, which I thought was an absolute mess, despite Christopher Lloyd, Jack Black. Like all these people I love. Yeah. And like, you know what? These would be weird, random people in Star Wars somewhere with their fucking Jack Black and his fucking hat and everything. Like, you know, on some weird planet somewhere, there's a Jack Black who's like, my last name is Bombardier. Fuck you. Like, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It just, none of the main story interested me at all.
Okay.
And I liked seeing Bo-Katan even. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, we're still bitching about the Darksaber. And I realized that we just started that as a problem at the end of season 2, but it's like, I'm already over this. Like, can we bellyache any more about the fucking Darksaber? And just the whole, and it's also, I think, was also a pandemic problem show too. Where a lot of it was kind of like, it looked real weird and fuzzy and everything.